Well, what do you know? We have more good news to talk about with the Laval Rocket today. Another win streak. Let's get into it. We are going to keep things on the positive notes again today, just like we did last week, because quite frankly, the Laval Rocket have kicked off 2024 in a really good way. They only had 2 games on the schedule last week, but it was the first of 3 consecutive games that they would be playing against division rivals, the Utica Comets. Going into last week, they were on a 2-game win streak, and they extended that last week by winning another 2 games. So the Laval Rocket are now on a 4-game winning streak. They haven't done 5 yet this season, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. These 2 games against the Comets both were played on the road for Laval, taking place at Adirondack Bank Center in Utica, New York. And these games were practically identical in a few ways. They both finished with a score of 4-3, both of them with a Laval victory, and both of them were won in the shootout. Only a couple of differences between the two. Jakub Dobeš got the start in net on Friday night. Kazimir Kaskasuo got the start on Sunday afternoon. Both goaltenders looked pretty decent in net and got their team all the way to a shootout and ended up victorious in the shootout. On Friday night, the Rocket did find themselves down 2-0 early in the game, and then they were able to come back not once but twice. They tied this game twice. They made it 2-2. Utica scored again to make it 3-2, and Laval was able to tie it again to make it 3-3 and force it to overtime, and after that, the shootout. Sunday afternoon's matinee was a little bit more of a back-and-forth affair, but again, both teams sticking with one another, getting to 3-3 at the end of regulation, forcing overtime, and then again, another subsequent shootout. Interestingly, for the Sunday game for Laval, they were down to 10 forwards to win that game, with both captain Gabriel Bourque and forward Sean Farrell both leaving the game in the first period due to injuries. And so JF Ull's squad finished that game and won it in a shootout with just 10 forwards left on the ice. The only other player missing from the roster was Emil Heineman, who had been recalled to Montreal. But overall, 2 more victories, both on the road, are definitely a good direction for Laval to be heading in. Laval was actually 1 place above the Utica Comets going into these 2 games, and so defeating them in a shootout 2 times in a row, although Utica did manage to eke out a point in both of those games, Laval further separated themselves from that last place team in the North Division. That puts them with a current record of 13-14, 3-2, making them 6th in the North Division. They are only 1 point out of 5th in the North Division, if you can believe that. They are 13th in the Eastern Conference and have moved up to 23rd in the league. Still a long way to go, but they are making strides little by little by little. The second half of this season for Laval could get rather interesting. In the prospect breakdown, I'm going to skip the bad stuff again this week, like I did last week, because quite frankly, after the start that this team had in the first couple of months of the season, I'm not feeling like I need to nitpick about weaknesses that they're still showing. The only thing I will say is they've got to shape up the penalties. They spent a ton of time in the penalty box in both of these games, and discipline continues to be an issue for this team, as it has been since the beginning of the season. But other than that, we're just going to focus on the good. Let's start with Arber Xhekaj. Arber Xhekaj has now fully settled into his role in Laval, and he is starting to really separate himself from the rest of the talent on the ice, not only on his team, but in terms of his opposition as well. He's in the 12 games that he has played, he's on a 6-game point streak. What's he done in those 6 games? 3 goals and 4 assists. Arber Xhekaj is doing the right things. And I hope to see him continue to progress. If he does, we're going to see him, I think, back in the NHL sooner rather than later. The only issue is going to be finding a spot for him. Add to that Logan Mailloux' performance. He continues to improve. And particularly since he has now been locked onto that top pairing in Laval with Arber Xhekaj, I think Arber Xhekaj is having a good effect on Logan Mailloux as well. He is on a 3-game point streak with a goal and 3 assists. Now, we know Logan Mailloux has never had issues on the offensive side of his game, and he really does still need to work more on the defensive portion of his game, but even that is starting to take a little more shape as he's starting to learn and grow as well. So also good notes for Logan Mailloux. Jared Davidson had himself a week. He scored in both games last week, including having that third goal, the game-tying goal on Sunday afternoon to force overtime, which then allowed his team to go forth into the shootout and win their second straight game over the weekend. An important goal there, and he got on the scoreboard on Friday night as well. Jared Davidson also starting to find some consistency. Hope that continues for him as well. But as far as my standout star for this week, I have to give those accolades to Arber Xhekaj because I'm just really pleased to see that he's embracing his current environment, embracing his situation, and he's making the most of it in what looks like very smart ways. And I hope to see him continue to do that. So what's up this week on the Laval Look Ahead? Well, the Rocket come back home to Quebec. They will play 3 games at Place Bell this week, including Wednesday night against, you guessed it, the Utica Comets. This will be their 3rd consecutive game against Utica. I imagine things will continue to be chippy as they were in the 2 games this past week. Again, as I mentioned, I'd like to see Laval be a bit more disciplined and stay out of the penalty box, but I don't know if that is going to happen against this opponent. But we will see if Utica has a bit of a revenge game in them or if Laval can win their 3rd consecutive game against Utica and get their first 5-game win streak of the season. Following that, they will welcome the Manitoba Moose to Place Bell on Friday night and Saturday afternoon. That's the AHL affiliate of the Winnipeg Jets. And if you remember, the last time that the Rocket played the Moose was in Manitoba. They came up with a kind of a surprising 2 wins on the road at the beginning of what was their 5 games in 7 days stretch that we saw back in November. And these 2 games against Manitoba that they won kicked off that week on a really positive note. Now, both of these teams are kind of in different situations now than they were 2 months ago. So we'll see if they can get another. I mean, just imagine if they could get another win against Utica and then could even get just 1 of 2 wins against Manitoba. We'll be talking about a very kind of different scenario for Laval heading into the second half of the season. So you can bet it's going to be some exciting hockey this week. We will have all of the coverage for you over at the Hockey News' Montreal team site. That is where we cover the Montreal Canadiens and the Laval Rocket. You can find us at thn.com/Montreal. The link is right down there where my name is. Be sure to bookmark that and visit every day for all of the latest Habs and Laval and prospect news. And also, don't forget to just take a second and tap that subscribe button down below too. Would love it if you hit that like button and leave a comment. Let us know what you're enjoying about the content here on the channel. I mentioned that Emil Heineman had been recalled by Montreal last weekend. Well, that came on the heels of some more bad news for Montreal that Christian Dvorak's season was over, needing to have surgery. And so this past week on the Canadiens Connection podcast, Rick Stevens and Michael Spinella took a look at the injury situation with the Canadiens in terms of the organization's depth and the trade assets available heading into the trade deadline and basically NHL trading season, and examined how and if the Canadiens can be competitive in the trade market this trade deadline season with injuries piling up, with assets kind of coming off the board, and where is the depth in the organization is very strong that they could work with, and where the organizational depth needs a little bit of bolstering and has weaknesses. It was a fascinating podcast, and if you missed it, well, you're in luck because you can check it out right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.